This episode of Return to Tradition was brought to you by the Saint Maker Catholic Life Planner Toolkit, a resource using Catholic wisdom and modern science to help you achieve that sanctity God is calling you to. Thousands of Catholics are on the Saint Maker journey, and you can join them with a 90-day risk-free trial offer backed with a 100% refund guarantee. Go to www.thesaintmaker.com/Return to Tradition to learn more, and use promo code Return to Tradition to save 10%. Earlier this year, I was a lone voice reporting on the ordination of Dom Alcuin Reid to the priesthood, an ordination secretly carried out by an unnamed cardinal who is in good standing with Rome, against the wishes of now Father Reid's bishop. The story should have gone viral, but it didn't. Father Reid won't say who the cardinal was who ordained him, but I suspect that I know who it is and I figured it out, and it won't surprise you to learn who I think it is. The bishop in question is certainly one of the better bishops in the church, one whose writings I frequently feature here on Return to Tradition, especially of late. No, not Archbishop Vigano, who, for whatever reason, has refused to participate in ordinations, and has gotten a lot of criticism from traditional Catholics for that decision of his. But this is another bishop we're talking about here, and I have reason to believe that the bishop in question is German conservative Cardinal Ludwig Mueller, close ally of Benedict XVI and part of the hermeneutic of continuity faction of the conservative wing of the Novus Ordo. Let's go over why I came to that understanding. In an interview with Cath.net last week, which is a German-language Catholic outlet, Cardinal Mueller answered questions about why he ordained priests for the first time in the pre-conciliar rite, and his thoughts on the growing factionalization of the Church, which we will go over here. But first, his statement is revealing. He was asked why he ordained priests earlier this year at 2 monasteries in southern France. This is a key detail here, folks. And those ordinations just happened to coincide with the time and region that Father Dom Alcuin Reid was ordained. And his monastery is located in that same part of France that those monasteries are in, that Cardinal Mueller visited. His interviewer asks him a basic question. Why did you ordain priests in the old rite? Cardinal Mueller's answer is, quote, I accepted the invitation to donate ordinations, accepted not because of the so-called ancient liturgy, but because of Christ's commission to the apostles and their successors to set up bishops, priests, and deacons as ministers of the church. We can all read about the mission and authority of the bishops in the apostolic successions in the first letter of Clement, lines 42 to 44, or in Hippolytus of Rome, Traditio Apostolica, but it was also the first time that I celebrated the liturgy in the form commonly used in the Latin Church until 1967 by Benedict XVI. It was established as an extraordinary rite and can still be validly and lawfully celebrated today under the given conditions. So I didn't change just any liturgical camp because for me, as a Catholic, bishop and theologian, a camp thinking that is absolutely un-Catholic from the outset is out of the question. I also affirm with full conviction the principles of the quote-unquote renewed liturgy according to the principles of the liturgy constitution of Vatican II, that's Sacrosanctum Concilium. Above all, the full conscious, active, and pious participation of all believers in the worship of God and the mediation of grace according to Sacrosanctum Concilium, paragraph 2, line 14. But even Francis, despite the restriction of the celebration of Holy Mass according to the earlier rite, also pointed out the devastating abuses of those who turn the divine liturgy into whimsical entertainment and self-betrayal. End quote. I respect Cardinal Mueller, but make no mistake, he is not a traditionalist. He's a part of the new order of things in the Church. He made that abundantly clear here and wants no one to think he's on the side of Archbishop Lefebvre, the SSPX, or angry trads like myself, at least in the goal of restoring the pre-conciliar state of the Church as much as that is possible. In fact, he goes on to talk about the SSPX here in a part that I won't really quote, but Mueller is firmly in the hermeneutic of continuity camp, despite Francis saying that there is no hermeneutic of continuity. He said that the Church did in fact dramatically change its theology and nature after the Council, that to hold to any other hermeneutic or way of understanding the situation and state in the Church today is to defy him and the Second Vatican non-binding pastoral council. And this brings me to this rather critical point. Despite Mueller's many statements saying that Francis is the Pope, that Benedict isn't the Pope, because he said that many, many times, and his at times praising Francis for certain other things he's done, Mueller has defied Francis openly before, especially on Traditionis Custodes, criticizing the document for being cruel and going too far. He's asked about Summorum Pontificum in the interview, and specifically about how there can be no conflict with the new rite of Mass in the Church. Here's Mueller's response, quote, "With his great theological judgment and his comprehensive humanistic education, Pope Benedict made the wise distinction between ordinary and extraordinary rites, and thus saved the entire spiritual richness and depth of Latin liturgical history for the present. On the other hand, whenever one allows oneself to be guided by prejudice and resentment, decisions are made that have negative consequences for the ecclesial community, its unity, and the promotion of the faith. The external liturgical form, beyond the immutable form and matter traced back to Christ and the apostles, is mutable and has found rich cultural expression in the many legitimate rites of the one Catholic Church." See Sacrosanctum Concilium, paragraph 2. I think that the consultants who urged Pope Francis to write Traditionis Custodes were misguided more by ideological fanaticism than by deeper insights into the Catholic doctrine of the sacraments and into the systematics of Catholic theology in general. To link the preference of a not small group, especially young Catholics, for the older form of liturgy with a rejection of Vatican II is implausible, because those responsible in Rome have recognized the erroneous teachings of the German synodal path by lay officials and bishops who, as a whole and in detail, diametrically contradict the teaching of Vatican II on the sacramentality of the Church, the priesthood, marriage, and the morality of the flesh. Here one sees more the speck in the brother's eye and does not notice the beam in one's own eye. In this dramatic hour of the universal Church, my advice would be to focus on the essentials of faith and not get bogged down by questions of variable orders, and to create reconciliation instead of creating new unrest again and again. For the Bishop of Rome, as the successor of Peter, is the everlasting, visible principle and foundation for the unity of the multitude of bishops and believers. See Lumen Gentium, paragraph 18, verse 23. End quote. You saw there his love of the conciliar documents, by the way, where he admits that there is a problem in the Church, that there is frankly a state of emergency. The German synodal way and their actions being mirrored by virtually all dioceses across the Western world right now makes that more than obvious. I'm going to jump right into the next quote, which is shorter because it's important. He slams the culture of the Novus Ordo pretty hard here and the liturgical abuses and misuses that are the norm. This is setting him up for his friendly relations with formerly SSPX-associated religious communities, which I'll get to in a moment. Quote, "It always depends on the harmony of thinking, feeling, and acting. Rather, the contrast is between a man-made politicizing ideology that leads to intolerance and a theology which is nothing but an attempt to understand revealed faith with reason, without subjecting it to our finite reason and the inexhaustible mystery of God, in our attempt to lock up our categories according to the motto, 'God can only do what I can imagine.' I myself," meaning Cardinal Mueller, "celebrate the liturgy in the new form with conviction, but I also understand that in the face of absurd abuse and the self-secularization of so-called progressive priests, there is a longing for a dignified form of liturgy, and for pious and believing priests, especially among young people who not only superficially want to belong to an official church, but also want to belong to the Church as the house of God, body of Christ and temple of the Holy Spirit, with a deep love for Christ. The measure of the liturgy is the worship of God and the sacrificial devotion to Him, and not reaching out to the faithful like the entertainer to his audience." End quote. That is a much nicer way of saying some of the very harsh things I say about the Novus Ordo and the culture surrounding the Novus Ordo. And he's not really wrong about it exactly. The Novus Ordo is built on an attempt to subject to pure reason the faith and to make it subject to man's understanding of things, and reducing the traditional Catholic movement to an ideological movement by people who are themselves ideologues is, frankly, nonsensical. But it's what we hear so much today. He goes on to describe the religious communities he ordained priests for as being in an irregular partial state of communion with the Church. And again, this is one of those things that I always get annoyed when I see. There's no such thing as partial communion, folks. And Rome has never called them in partial communion. They have an irregular canonical status. But this is critical. Cardinal Mueller ordained priests that Rome would bristle at and use the pre-conciliar form of ordination for the first time with both groups. which suggests that he doesn't really care what Traditionis Custodes says or what Francis or the local ordinaries think about it. And that means he agrees that there is a state of emergency in the church, because that's not a small thing. And he did this at the same time as the mysterious ordination of Dom Alcuin Reid occurred, in the same or neighboring region that Father Reid was ordained in without his bishop's approval. In early June, ordinations were prohibited by Rome for these dioceses, and Father Reid was ordained just prior to that in secrecy. At the same time, Cardinal Mueller was in country in the same part of France ordaining traditional priests against the rules outlined in Traditionis Custodes. Was it Cardinal Mueller who ordained Father Dom Alcuin Reid? Father Reid won't say. But do his words here that I quoted extensively make the case that he thinks the whole situation is a tragedy, and that what we need is unity and continuity in the church to such a degree that he's willing to ordain priests illicitly, which is a schismatic act. That does not make him in schism, but is a schismatic act according to Rome. And he did this knowing full well that Rome would get angry if they found out. Look, I doubt anyone in authority with Rome watches this, so that's why I feel free to report on it, but I'm curious what you think about this whole mess. Is Cardinal Mueller right that the German synodal way and the cruelty of Francis's various decrees have created a state in the church where such ordinations should be carried out? Do you think he's the one who ordained Father Alcuin Reid? Again, remember, Father Reid refused to name the cardinal, only saying that he is in unequivocal good standing with Rome. Cardinal Mueller fits that bill to a T. So let me know what you think of this story and the possibility of that being the case in the comments. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. It does really help, as does sharing these messages on social media. That helps a lot as well. Check out links to my various social media in the comments section or in the description box and Patreon and all the rest if you like. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.